Elections are usually fought on short-term cost of living issues. Our politicians, they compete with scare campaigns and band-aid solutions. But when you think about it, most short-term crises are the consequence of long-term policy failure. Key ingredients in our cost of living crisis are weak real wages growth, unaffordable housing and high energy costs. And the causes of these have been building for a long time. To avert an intergenerational tragedy, the next Australian government must do three things. First, it must reform the tax system to boost business investment and productivity, to improve housing affordability, and most importantly, to take the burden of balancing the budget off the shoulders of young Australian workers. The second thing it must do is it must put Australia on a more certain and more ambitious carbon abatement trajectory. And then the third thing it must do is to fix our broken nature laws, to prepare the environment and to provide certainty for business investment, including renewable energy projects.
Dr. Ken Henry there. We wanted to include some experts also in this show. There are some big ideas that they would like embraced. Zali, on that issue of, he says it's going to be an intergenerational tragedy, particularly if these tax issues are not resolved.
Well, absolutely, and I think the audience just got a first-hand view of what often happens in Parliament, the fighting between the major parties on these issues. No one even mentioned tax reform in that discussion of how do we balance between first homeowners and families getting into the housing market or renters against the interests of investors, for example, in the property market. No one's willing to touch that hot potato, but clearly Ken Henry is pointing out that reform is going to be needed. We have to have that difficult conversation around reforming that system. The intergenerational debt when it comes to our carbon emissions is huge, right? Not only are young people going to be struggling under very high rents, hard to get into the house ownership, they are also bearing a burden of an ageing population. We currently have about 3.7 people working for every person over 65 that's retired. Our major revenue base is from people's work and the tax you pay. By 2060, it will be 2.7. So that generation will have an even greater burden through the current tax system to pay for the ageing population and all the services. So, and then we know through the degradation of nature and our ever carbon emissions and climate change escalating and accelerating, we lose about 50% of GDP to nature. So huge impact to our productivity, to the cost in the future. So young generations are going to have absolute, the intergenerational burden they have from the failure to act for the last 10 to 20 years is huge.
So Dr. Henry raises these issues. Richard, they're clearly not the main issues of this campaign. Is that reasonable?
Oh, well, it's reasonable, but it's not good. I mean, let's be clear. Like, I'm an economist, so apologies. The only thing
to apologise first, yeah.
The only thing that said bore people more than talking about budgets is talking about tax reform. But let me make it exciting for you. Australia's one of the richest countries in the world. We're the third biggest fossil fuel exporter in the world. And in Saudi Arabia, when the price of oil goes up, they feel rich. And in Qatar, when the price of gas goes up, they feel rich. But we've so cooked our tax system that in Australia, the third biggest fossil fuel exporter in the world, when the price of oil and gas and coal go up, we feel poor. We call it an energy crisis. We call it a cost of living crisis. Now, in Norway, which is also a big fossil fuel exporter, they tax their fossil fuel industry and give their kids free university education. In Australia, we subsidise. But get this, in Australia, we subsidise the fossil fuel industry. We give more than half of the gas we export away for free, and we charge our kids a fortune to go to uni. Tell me politics is boring. Tell me budgets are boring.
All right.
When we elect people, when they form budgets, they're the big choices that we get to make. We're choosing to be poor. We're choosing to have expensive childcare, expensive health, expensive education. Other countries tax their fossil fuel industry.
I'm going to bring in Roshena. Some of those questions are also about the tax burden on young people. That's not That's not on the ballot in this election.
No, it's not. And we do need to start having those big discussions as a country, both about tax reform, but also the sort of economy we want to have. You know, there's been discussions about the things that we dig up in this country. What about the things that build on our strengths into the future? So Melbourne is a knowledge city. We are perfectly primed to grow the sorts of industries that mean all of our kids and grandkids are going to have jobs where they're not talking about low wage growth. They are going to be some of the highest earners in the world if we play it right. Things like biomed, even energy, those tech sectors. We already have the bones in that. And I would love to see every level of government, the feds, but also the state government, turning their mind to that long-term picture. We've talked about some pretty expensive policies today. It's those same voters, those younger voters who are going to be paying for those policies in the future. Let's grow our revenue base and our economy as a nation so we can get some hope back about the future of this country.
OK, Ken Henry says big reforms. Why aren't they on the ballot? Briefly.
Well, I don't agree with Ken Henry, actually. I usually do, but not on this occasion. I actually think we're talking about some really big and important things this election. I mean, can I just make the point? We've had a housing crisis building in our country for 40 years, and finally we're having an election, much as I disagree with almost everything that Michael says about housing. At least we're talking about it. At least we've got a competition here about who's going to actually put their shoulder to the wheel and have a go at this. So I think there's been a few things written about how this election's all about things that, don't matter perhaps.
Well, it's a spend-a-thon, and both of you have been on a bit of a spend-a-thon. Both of you, haven't you?
Well, I wouldn't call investing in new homes for Australians a spend-a-thon. We're investing in trying to help people build a future for themselves and their families. I think it's really denigrating to call things that are important legacies spend-a-thons. Building social and affordable housing is an important investment.
OK, well, we're in deficit, and you're spending a lot, aren't you, Michael?
Well, I'd say this. We do have an over-reliance on personal income tax in this country, and that undoubtedly is going to, as Zali alluded to, going to hit younger people more. That was one of the reasons why we were really enthusiastic about our first home buyer mortgage deductibility, because it is pretty well targeted at younger Australians who are going to be the beneficiaries of that tax.
Why not just systemically cut their tax?
But at a systemic level too, absolutely. I think the over-reliance on personal income tax undoubtedly hurts younger Australians more. I disagree with Richard to a degree. I mean, some of our biggest taxpayers in this country are the mining companies who literally do pay for the... Well, it's true.
Not the gas industry.
No, I'm talking about, BHP.
I was talking about gas.
Well, BHP Billiton would be one of our biggest taxpayers.
And I was talking about gas, not BHP.
OK, well, I thought you were talking about miners in...
No, I said gas.
Gas industry?
So the point I would make, though, is this election, I think, finally, we've got to speaking about what I think is going to be the challenge for governments into the future, and that is home ownership. We haven't heard much from the government with home ownership this term. Clare, to her credit, she puts out a whole lot of very aspirational targets. She's spoken tonight about 1.2 million homes. She fails to mention that the industry believes that they're falling 400,000 short, which would mean we build fewer homes over the next 5 years than we built in the last 5 years.
All right.
The Housing Australia Future Fund, the Housing Australia Future Fund...
I'm going to wind you up so I can get to our next question.
...has not built a single home.
All right.